Hello and welcome to a very special How I Paint Things. Now, the Horus Heresy is an incredible body of collaborative fiction from multiple authors across decades of work, and it features some of the most overwrought Shakespearean scale villains, heroes, and all sorts, which is just brilliant. I really like the setting. And then you come across these guys, the World Eaters, who they never had a chance. They're called the World Eaters. Their Primarch's name is literally Angron. I don't think there was ever an opportunity they weren't going to be bad guys. Luckily, painting them is incredibly simple, so I'm going to show you a really simple method for getting grimy white armor on the table with a minimum of fuss. Now, this method will work just as well on Terminators, Mark II and Mark IV power armor, your characters, everything of the sort. Paint up an army like this and they will look brilliant. So all of the paints will be listed in the description below so you can follow along. Let's get started. So as with any miniature, the first thing we've done is to prime this dude, and I've actually done this in 2 steps. I started first of all by priming it all over in uniform grey from the army painter, though Mechanica standard grey would work perfectly well. I just had one can closer to hand. What I've done then is to perform kind of a zenithal highlight with white, matte white from the army painter. Now, it's not a perfect one because it's a little difficult to do this properly with a rattle can. But I also don't like, personally, I'm not a huge fan of extreme zenithal highlights. I think they look a little peculiar. What I'm talking about is basically tilting the fella this way while I'm priming him and spraying from above so that I get a little bit of shading, like up under his arms and his back of his suit there, you'll see that. You'll also see too, well hopefully you'll see, the camera might not pick this up, but there is a very slight speckling on the armor. The white isn't a perfect coat, and that's deliberate. What I've done is to hold my can a little further back than usual while spraying, so that the mist, the paint itself dissipates just a little bit before it hits the miniature. And then you get this uneven white, which it's a matter of personal taste. Some of you might not like it. I think it looks a little cool. It's a slightly speckled, little bit worn white armor. Saves me having to do like really extreme chipping effects later. Now, there's nothing that would stop you from just painting this, priming it in white. I've chosen to do this because I like the effect it gives, but if you are looking to save time overall, just a white primer will do the job. Now, the very first color we're going to apply is going to be the blue for the Legion colors. For this, we're using Calidor Sky. Now, this is a lovely, rich, very saturated blue, a little bit more. It's a little lighter than McCrag blue, but still quite a rich color, which I really like. So I've got my medium layer brush here, and I bought fresh brushes for the first time in almost a year the other day. This has been it's been really nice to paint. But what I'm going to do is just apply this over, well, all of the blue areas. Now, where those are is, of course, up to you. There's some really cool examples of these guys painted online. There's also, artwork which shows different configurations, what have you. I'm going to do the shoulder pads, this knee, and this little doubler here at the top of his pack. I think this looks really cool in blue. Stuff that I want to stay white, like for example, this section I'm pointing to here, what I'll do is to start by applying paint close to it and making sure that I'm drawing my brush away. So don't paint towards the stuff you want to keep white, paint away from it. And yeah, we'll probably find I do need to apply a second coat of this to make sure I've got a nice solid color. Up on a shoulder pad here, I actually applied a third one in a couple of areas just to make sure it was perfect. Not something that you'd need to do if you're just smashing these guys out very quickly. Now, on that subject, I'm going to now paint in the black on his weapon casings and what have you. If you're painting Mark IV Marines or something where the gaps in the armor, so joints around his legs and up his arms and such, if they're a little more visible, you can black these in here too. On Mark III armor, I'm not going to bother because what a lot of work and you barely see it. So I'm going to skip that step, but otherwise I'm going to apply goodness me, that black now. Now the same trick applies. When you come near the white stuff, slow down and paint away from hands and joints and all that sort of carry on. Now, I've seen in a few pieces of artwork and a couple of really cool armies that I've found online, some folks will leave the head of the axe in white. I quite like how that looks, so that's what I'm going to do. Obviously, your spacemen, you can paint them how you like, but that's what I'm going to do. I have now a little bit of Evil Sun Scarlet, and I have watered this down roughly half and half, paint and water. What I'm going to do is just dot in this fella's eyes. And I'm doing this now because if I invariably make a mistake and splodge the faceplate, or I might get lucky and avoid that dreadful fate. Nope, there we go. You can come back and tidy that with a little bit of white. So leave your tidy up until last because you don't want to have to keep coming back to the white if you make a few other mistakes as you're going. Just save yourself the time. Now we can start moving on to some of the metallics, and for this I'm going to start with Iron Hand Steel. This is quite a light base color, it's quite nice, and I'm going to use this to paint in, well, funnily enough, all of the steel details, as well as a few little bits of trim here and there. You'll find this actually covers fairly well, even over white. Sometimes I tend to find that white is not the best primer color for metallics, but Iron Hand Steel just does the job. So away you go. Once you've got all of your silver details applied, we can now put on the brass. Now there's a few ways that you can do this. You can stick to Balthazar Gold if you wanted to, though I think that will end up quite a bit darker than you might like once we shade it. If you want a richer, more gold finish, then Retributor Armor is an easy win. I have here Hashut Copper, and I think you'll see why I would pick this one. It's going to take 2 coats on some of the larger areas, like up on the shoulder pad trim here, so we get a little bit of the primer still showing through. But this is a lovely warm brass, and once we shade it, that is going to just look fantastic. Now the thing I really like about World Eaters 2 is that all of the trim on like their knees and arms, what have you, most of the artwork I've seen shows that as being white, so I don't have to fuss around painting all of that as well. So take your time with this Hashut Copper, and away we go. We'll get a look at what this looks like once this stage is done as well. Now for the sake of interest, this is what the first coat is going to look like. So you see it's a little bit streaky and we do have some of the white still showing through. But second coat over the top of that, no problem. Now after that second coat, you'll see that color's much stronger, and I really like how it looks. You may need to come back on some of the flat areas and give it a third, but this is ordinarily, when I talk about speed painting, the real bonus in batch painting. So if you're painting 5 or 10 Marines at a time, by the time you finish the 5th one, the first guy you started is ready for his next coat. So think about that if you're going to go that route. Now I do need to do a little bit of tidy up, so I'm going to grab some of my white, some blue, and just fix any of the little blobs and mistakes I've got. So let's get into that now. Won't take terribly long. Now once you've done that, you'll see those little bits on the shoulder pads in particular are tidied up. What I'm going to do is hit them with a gloss varnish. Now for this I'm going to use the Vallejo Spray Gloss Varnish. I've got that can just tucked over here. And once that's on, you want to leave that for at least half an hour to make sure that it is set. All right? Cannot stress enough that if you tried the next stage without letting the varnish dry thoroughly, it is all going to go to pot. So let's just spray this, and then I'm going to go off and make myself a cup of tea. We'll come back once that is set. And you'll see once that dries, oh my goodness, that is shiny. But there is a reason for this. When we gloss varnish a surface, it's going to prevent shade from sticking to flat areas. We're going to make this run more effectively into creases and crevices and all of the recesses of the miniature. Now the shade we're going to use, this, well, you've heard of Ali's brown liquid if you've stuck around with me for long enough. This is Mark's Marine Juice, because a while back during one of the Horus Heresy weekenders, Mark Bedford shared how the Forge World army painting team get through stuff very quickly, and it was this juice was mentioned. Now, this is an equal mix of Nuln Oil, Reikland Flesh Shade, and Lamian Medium. Now, In some cases, I've heard that water is used instead of the medium, but I haven't had as good results from that. So instead, we're going to stick to just those 3. So as always, I've given this a really good shake. The easiest way to make this, I just bought 1 pot of each, threw them all into a big jug, and then have decanted them back into their pots. But yeah, this is stuff which is actually useful for a lot of things. We're going to go ahead, load up my brush, and quite generously start throwing this all over the model. Now, it's important that you do really jam it into the recesses. Yeah, same as any other shade. Once this is applied, we're going to then let this dry for another half hour. So yeah, have something else to do while you're waiting for each of these stages to dry, I would suggest. Now, isn't that just magic? You're going to need to matte varnish it to get rid of the last of that glossiness, but the Lahmian medium will do a lot of that job for you, and you can see straight away what a difference that makes. I quite like that slightly grimy appearance. The whole thing of the Horus Heresy being a fairly brutal affair where there weren't leagues of people polishing these Marines' armor every few minutes. You know, I like the slightly grubby look, but it is up to you. You could go ahead and just base them and put them straight on the table like this, but I think a few little highlights are going to make a world of difference here. So I have some Sycorax bronze, and I'm going to use this to highlight, well, the bronzy bits. On the blue areas, we're going to go up to Hoeth blue for some of the rivets and any little lines and edges you want to paint in this way. Now with just a little Dawnstone, we'll do in the edges of any black details that we want to. Now, unless you're painting a character like a Legion Praetor or a Consul, I'd suggest don't bother highlighting the white. You know, for your bulk troops, that is going to look just fine. But if you do want to go that little bit further, grab yourself some white scar, and you can just dab in a few corners to brighten these up a little. Now, I haven't done much white. I've really only dotted in some of the rivets there, and I think that looks quite cool. Just a little bit to brighten up those edges. Not something I'd probably do if I was going to do traitor aligned, and that's what I want to get to now. I've got a little bit of black here, and I'm just going to quickly blacken the rim of the base, because in a second I'm going to matte varnish this miniature. This is going to make this a little easier to paint in the rim of the base once all of the varnishes are done. So I'll do this now. Then I'll go outside, and again, hit him with a matte varnish spray. And then you'll see why I'm going to do that stage before I finish him off. We're going to finish him as a traitor world eater. Now when at last that matte varnish is dried, we're on to our final stage. And we're doing this last because this is a slightly glossy finish. I have here Blood for the Blood God, and the best way you can apply this is with a ragged, grimy old brush which is not going to hold its shape at all. You want to get some of this and just jab it into your bristles, fairly randomly, and then let's start splodging messily. Oh, it's gross. Now the best thing you can do with this is to apply about that much, then let it dry. Because you'll find if you come back and add another sort of splotch over the top of one of these, you'll get a really cool, dried, gory effect. And it's dreadful. So here I am saying, oh, it's so cool. Oh, it's gross, it's dreadful. Yeah, it's corn, it's world eaters. You want to be kind of grimy. So concentrate on areas where you reckon, you know, that stuff is going to collect. You can also jab most of it off your brush and start just tickling some of the areas where you reckon a bit of arterial spray would come up and hit this dude when he's fighting in combat. Best thing is, you can also smudge it quite easily with your finger while it's wet and move it around. So I'm going to apply just a little bit more of this. I don't want to go overboard with it. But yeah, once I have had some fun... Oh, God, that's gross. Once I've had some fun with this, I'm going to go ahead and pop a base on him. We'll see what he looks like when all of this mush is on and he is finished. And there at last, our Traitor World Eater is complete. Now I say this every time, but this was a lot of fun. I will include the base recipe in the description for those of you who are going to ask, because It's pretty cool. It's really easy, and I like the slightly irradiated look you get from using a little bit of orange in there, but you'll find that down the bottom. Now this is really easy to do. It does involve very few paints, but mixing up the marine juice, it's up to you if you're going to go ahead and make pots of that. I am going to use it for a whole bunch of things. It's a pretty good universal shade. It's a little more red and a little bit darker than Agrax Earthshade. You'll see this guy doesn't look quite so grimy, and I like that finish. Now, a quick note on the subject of the blood spatters. It is very easy to go overboard with that very quickly. I would suggest you're normally going to find it looks better if you have too little than too much. So I've tried to give him kind of a, like he's been in combat, he's hit a couple of guys. You'll see coming around in a second here, this pop, the old backhand, that is at the suggestion of Mrs. Sledge, that he's pistol whipped somebody, and they do not face enemies that stand up to that kind of treatment. So it's a lot of fun, but mind how you go. You will drench your work very quickly. So as always, thank you very much to Exit 23 Games for the light and sound equipment, as well as the patrons who are keeping me ticking in paint and glue, including my wonderful producers, Alan Nuttall, Kyrie Crawford, Trainboy, Fred, and Jimmy. Your support really is invaluable. Any questions or anything, feel free to drop them in the old comment box below. My Twitter and Instagram are both linked there too. So thank you very much for your time, one and all, and you all enjoy the rest of your day.